Hello folks, this is Marcus from Your Move Games, and today we're going to be discussing final rushing rules with you all. This is actually going to be part one of a two-part series. Today we're just going to cover the basics, and the next video, which should materialize here in a couple of weeks, will cover the special situations. But for right now, we're going to be covering the basic rules of final rushing, and one of the first things you should know is, or at least pay attention to, is in the main rule book, this glorious guy right here, on page 8, before we even get into final rushing, it's really good to familiarize yourself with these universal terms, what directly ahead means, what most directly ahead means, what facing side and front arc means. So page 8 in the rule book, you really need to know this stuff before you move on to the actual final rushing rules. Now, the final rushing rules themselves start around page, here you go, 58, and it seems like a lot as far as rules go, because it goes all the way up through page 74. However, a good deal of this space is taken up by diagrams that were so lovingly laid out by Corey. So it's not quite as intimidating as it seems to learn these rules. But the basic idea, as far as final rushing is concerned, if you can just follow along, is if you get to page 61 right here, these are the 5 criteria. It's a 5-step process, and 5 steps, again, sounds like a lot, but these are relatively simple and intuitive. So first of all, you have to make sure that you have a proper standing order. So let's say we're controlling Men of Hawkshold and we're facing the Lords of Blackhold here. All right. First of all, standing order. You have to have a closed standing order on your unit. So if there's no closed standing order, it's not happening. It can't be a range. It can't be a hold. Your unit can't be routing. It cannot be disrupted. It's got to have a C on the card. Absolutely. Now, whether or not the C is like, if you want a unit objective or you have an objective behind the unit and your unit deems that the unit has to go through the enemy unit to get to the objective, that's fine. But regardless of that, no C, no charge. So right now this unit is eligible. Let's assume it's your turn. You're playing Men of Hawkshold. This unit is eligible to final rush. Second is visibility. Is a unit visible? In this case, if you're attacking this unit, if you intend to final rush this unit, yes, it is visible. It's plenty visible. You can have instances where, like, say, you might be in final rush range, but say there's like a hill in the middle and you actually can't see on the other side of the hill, or perhaps there's another enemy unit blocking that. So this guy is still within, let's say he starts off the turn right there. He's still within 3.5 inches, but he can't final rush this unit because there's something blocking it. He can't see it. It's not visible. Not to mention the fact that there's no clear side anyway facing. So the next is open path. You have to have at least 2.5 inches of an open path in order to get through to make a final rush. So you sometimes have instances like this because, war isn't always clean and neat and tidy. And so you can have a thing like this going on right here. And even if the great swordsman right here, they have the distance. They're within 3.5 inches. I can tell it just by eyeballing it, but just to prove to you all, there it is. They still can't get in there. They don't have a clear path. That's not enough space, not to mention the fact they're going to be overlapping a lot of the allied units. So even though in a vacuum without these units around them, that's a final rush easily. And this sort of situation right here, they just can't see it. They don't have an open path through that. It's too small. Finally, distance. Well, second to last, finally, the distance. So you have to be able to be within your movement, the movement cost or the movement class of your unit. So if you're within 3.5 inches of any center point, whether it's that center point or this center point, you can definitely make it. So that's about 3.5 inches from the center point up to that point right there. But if this unit is a little further out from that, then you're not going to be able to achieve the final rush this turn, unless you have a magic command card that gives you that bonus. Men of Hawkshold don't have it. Very few factions do. And then finally, step 5, nearest enemy. So let's say you have an instance where we're going to use the Lancers for this example because they have a movement cost of 6. And they got some wheels on them. So say you have an instance like this and you have 2 enemies and they're a little further out, but both of them are within 6 inches of you, right? So this enemy is about 3 7/5 of an inch, and this enemy is within just a little hair under 5 inches. The Lancers are going to final rush that unit right there, unless you use a command action to change, to give him a specific standing order objective to close on this unit, or you can take direct control. A very important change that we've had with the version 4 rules is that now you can final rush a unit that you are direct controlling. It used to be that you could not. If you took direct control of a unit for a turn with a command action, you could not final rush anybody with it. That has changed in version 4 of the rules. But in this case right here, again, looking at it in a vacuum, if you don't do anything and you have a closed standing order on a unit, they're going to go at the nearest unit. Now, there is an exception to this as far as nearest path or straight ahead. Remember, going back to page 8, directly ahead. So in this case, there's an exception, and if you pay attention to page 66, the nearest enemy is determined differently from standard movement. It's basically going to be the enemy that is more directly ahead. So even though just this unit is closer to the Voynich swordsman, the Lancers are closer to the Voynichs, they are less directly ahead than the halberdiers, so they're going to final rush the halberdiers. That's how that works. Now, important thing to note as far as final rush movement, it's not normal movement. So let's say, for example, this is in final rush range. You can see a center point. You're about 3 inches away. If this was normal movement, you still wouldn't be able to get the final rush because you would have to turn it, and your unit would end up this way. But on a final rush turn, no maneuver is necessary. They're just going to give that little extra sprint, that little extra push, and they're just going to go lock up right there. You don't have to worry about, how they're going to achieve that movement. They're just going to go right in as long as they are within 3.5 inches, which is their movement class. Whatever the movement class of that unit, as long as you are within that, you are equal to or less than that range from a unit, as long as you can see that center point, you can get right on it. And now we have another interesting case where let me cover this first. Also, unit facing. What is the nearest side of the unit? So the way you determine that is you draw a straight line to the corner of the opposing unit, through the enemy unit, right? And whichever side that line comes on, that's the nearest side. So clearly, this center point is closer to the side center point. So, as Bob Ross says, that's a happy little final rush. However, if they're further out front, if you draw that line, that imaginary line from the corner to corner to the facing side of the enemy unit, and that center point is still closest, well, then you're going to final rush this side. Now, a really neat thing about final rushing is that you can do it in any order. So you decide if both units are within final rushing range, like this example right here. If you really want the great swordsman to get in there, they're going to get in there, and the Lancers are going to have to go somewhere else. They're going to have to go around or whatever. But since this is the nearest facing side to both units, even though the Lancers are within range and they can see that side center point, the enemy unit, the facing side is the front side for both of these Hawkshold units. So one of these units will have to final rush the front. None of them can final rush the side. And you can also do a twos company, but that's going to be covered in the next video. But the thing is that you get to choose who goes first. So if you really wanted the Lancers in there, for example, the Lancers will shoot right in. Now, another thing to note as far as final rushing is concerned is you have to be able to get at least half of the card front onto an enemy unit. The cards are 3.5 inches wide, so 1.75 inches, which is basically from the center point to the side of the card. You have to at least be able to fit that in there. So say if you have instances where everything's all messed up and it's not a clean, easy battle, as long as I can get at least half of that card frontage, I can achieve a final rush. It doesn't have to be perfectly lined up like that unless you can achieve it. If you can achieve it, there's no other obstacles. You can go right in and get on that. However, if there's some blockage, somebody's blocking, and you've got a nice little battle going on with a werewolf pack and a great swordsman unit, which would be an epic battle, by the way, as long as you can get at least half that card on there, you're fine. Now, if it's an instance where it's more like this, and that's the nearest facing side, you're in trouble because you can't quite get half the unit there. However, if you can see the side, if you're a little further out, even though, it's an exception here, even though this is clearly, draw the line through the unit, the nearest side, it is blocked by something, and if you have the range, if you have the movement to make it, well, 6 inches here, right? Oops, sorry. To the flank, this is an exception. You can get this side because this is now the nearest facing side because this side is blocked. So that's pretty much the basics of the final rushing rules today that we're going to cover. We're going to get into the the corner cases, the stranger, weirder stuff in the next video. But basically, as long as you can follow these 5 or meet these 5 criteria here on page 61, that's a very key, critical page as far as final rush rules are concerned, and also just understanding what directly ahead means, what a facing side is, and what a front arc is as well. In fact, I'm going to cover that right now. Let's say we have an enemy unit right here. Now, they're not directly in front of it, but your unit, as long as it's in the front arc, can see an enemy unit. So even though his center point is right here, he can see this unit. And they are within final rush range, so they are capable of going in there and making that final rush. However, if this enemy unit is outside of the forward arc is drawing a direct line across the front of the unit, and clearly the werewolf pack is behind that front arc. This unit cannot see them. It cannot final rush them. It can turn and face them and set up a final rush for the next turn, but on this turn, it cannot do that. So don't do that. All right, so that's about it. And hopefully we'll see you for the next installment in a couple of weeks. This is Marcus from Your Move Games signing off. Have a great day.